How ILM helped James Gunn's Superman soar with high-flying visual effects. ILM's Enrico Damm, Paul Kavanagh, Stephen King, and Matt Middleton share details about ILM's role in the director's first theatrical release from the DC Universe. By J. Stobie. James Gunn's DC Studios' Superman, 2025, has leaped to the forefront of the cinematic superhero landscape, awing audiences with a message that inspires optimism and hope with a side of introspection. Industrial light and magic played a crucial part in the visual effects that brought this uplifting story to life, collaborating with Gunn and production visual effects supervisor Stefan Soretti on their quest to supply a fresh perspective on the legendary character. ILM visual effects supervisor Enrico Damm, Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, 2016, Ahsoka, 2023 present, ILM animation supervisors Paul Kavanagh, Star Trek, 2009, Deadpool and Wolverine, 2024, and Stephen King, The Avengers, 2012, The Batman, 2022, and CG supervisor Matt Middleton, Mission Impossible, Dead Reckoning Part 1, 2023, Alien, Romulus, 2024, joined ILM.com to chat about ILM's work on Superman, from taking the lead on characters such as Superman, the Hammer of Boroviya, and Ultraman to tackling a large section of the climactic final battle involving a Metropolis baseball field, a deadly interdimensional rift, and fan-favorite dog, Crypto. Welcome to Metropolis. I joined Superman early on during pre-production, when visual effects producer Susan Pickett and Steph Soretti approached ILM to talk about how we could build a Metropolis that we could art direct in a real-time fashion, Enrico Damm explains to ILM.com. This allowed the production designer and director to creatively iterate until we achieved a layout that would build the foundation for the final, post-production asset. We had real-time sessions with Stefan, production designer, Beth Mickle, and, occasionally, even James Gunn, where he would be able to direct changes in real time. We established a look that was shared with the previs companies and the other vendors on the show, which permitted us to have everybody start with the same asset. Imbuing Metropolis with the living, breathing atmosphere of an actual city without replicating a real-world location was extremely important to Gunn. However, since roughly 70% of the design was inspired by New York, Stefan Soretti and Susan Pickett authorized ILM to undertake an excursion to gather material. I spent a couple of days in a helicopter over New York City, capturing reference photography, Damm details. At the same time, my colleague Declan Young was capturing backdrops. CG supervisor Matt Middleton would go on to rely on Damm City references, explaining, our environment team at ILM Sydney studio did a large amount of the Metropolis City build. We knew this asset would need to be shared between vendors, and it was strongly based on the New York City references. We built Metropolis in sections, including various hero sections for our work. We had hundreds of unique buildings, which gave Metropolis a great organic feel. That was driven by what Enrico had done before the shoot had started. Many times, we might only build 10 buildings and do variations of them, but on Superman, we utilized an enormous number of distinct buildings to avoid a procedural feel. On-set observations. Damm's duties intensified even further once filming got underway. I was on set for pretty much every ILM-related shot, he says. I made sure that ILM would get what was necessary for our work, and I assembled things that could help us, which weren't part of principal photography. On the side, I gathered motion tests and scans of his cape and suit, essentially grabbing David and the on-set visual effects crew for an hour to film him in the suit and see how the folds move, Damm elaborates. During the shoots of ILM sequences, I met with David almost daily and, with client-side visual effects supervisor Steph Soretti, we developed a specifically designed scanning system to gather data for ILM face swap training. Since David Corenswet portrays both Superman and Ultraman in the film, this technology was useful for the moments when the two characters face off with each other. The system helped us capture David's face as faithfully as possible, so we could train a system to replicate him and face swap in those moments. Almost every day, we held sessions with David to go through various lines to ensure that we captured every nuance of his performance, so we would be able to replicate it digitally on his stunt doubles. suiting up with Superman. ILM's crucial involvement continued off the set and into post-production. The client put their faith in ILM and had us build Superman, the Hammer of Boroviya, and Ultraman, 3 characters who we see frequently, Damm notes. We even had the pleasure to have David Corenswet visit ILM's San Francisco studio. Being a huge Star Wars fan, David had quite a blast. We scanned him using our proprietary Medusa scanning system to recreate him on screen, which included a full digital replica with muscle, bone, and cloth systems. We're dealing with an Ultra being flying at ultra speed, so we did a great deal of cloth simulation on his cape, suit, and hair to portray an appropriate sense of speed. ILM's animation supervisor, Paul Kavanagh, is based at the San Francisco studio, the hub that oversaw the entirety of ILM's work on Superman. Speaking to the prevalence of ILM's digital Superman replica, Kavanagh says, "A lot of the times when you see Superman flying along in his suit and cape with his hair fluttering, the only thing that wasn't CG was his face. But everything we did was based off of the live-action shoot, and we were very faithful to it. We weren't making up a whole new shot, we were simply enhancing what was filmed." Meanwhile, operating out of ILM Sydney studio, ILM animation supervisor Stephen King was brought onto the project at the beginning of post-production. As an animation supervisor, my job is to collaborate with Enrico and Paul to make sure that we're creating the vision that's coming from James Gunn and Steph Soretti, King remarks. I helped establish the movement of Superman. The animation department was responsible for enhancing David's performances by taking away the sense of him being on the rig they had filmed him on. We made certain that his body performance didn't feel like he was on a rig, that he was actually flying. When I think of Superman, I think of his incredible strength and his ability to fly, so we needed that to appear as real as possible. King praises the cooperation between ILM's various departments, stating, "Our team at ILM Sydney studio was in charge of Superman, creating the digital double that would go hand in hand and blend seamlessly with David Corenswet's performance. For shots where we had to do a fully digital version, we wanted to ground it in reality. Our simulation department took care of his cape in every shot that we worked on, making it move and feel authentic. In many of the flying shots, we had to add digital hair because hair is difficult to recreate on stage. It's either completely flat and doesn't move, or a fan is placed in front of the actor and affects their performance by causing them to squint." James Gunn entrusted ILM with the title character, guaranteeing that Superman shown in our work was of the utmost importance for us. Boravian brutality. Damm also hones in on David Corenswet's hair, referencing his previous point about the bald cap utilized to film the battle against the Hammer of Boroviya. James Gunn wanted to approach that scene with visual effects to allow us to portray an appropriate amount of speed within the hair and sell how fast these beings are flying. In the Hammer of Boroviya sequence, it's all digital hair. It was a unique challenge because there's no room for errors. If there's something off, it would immediately break the illusion, Damm asserts. In terms of the character itself, the Hammer of Boroviya was essentially a hard surface object, Damm adds. Since he's wearing a suit, he was a bit easier than Superman in the sense that we weren't dealing with flesh. The main challenge emerged when it came to texturing and shading the character, as there's a significant amount of creative and technical know-how called for to craft the shading response that a metallic object has. Damm hopes that audiences are unable to tell which shots necessitated the Hammer of Boroviya becoming a digital character, noting, there was a full-on practical suit in many shots, where the on-set crew filmed him on wires. Certain action beats and acrobatic movements required he either be partially or completely replaced. Even in a handful of close shots, where you might assume the practical version remained, we had to go with the digital version because the story changed after principal photography had finished. The nature of narratives. As breathtaking as the visual effects of Superman are, Damm and King both emphasize that ILM's contributions were all done in service to James Gunn's compelling story. There's a sequence where Superman and Lois Lane, Rachel Brosnahan, are deep in conversation, but you have the Justice Gang fighting a giant jellyfish-type creature in the background. We played on the size of the creature so it would be subtle and not moving fast enough to be distracting, King professes.